I'm Ava, 29, freelance senior graphic designer, 8 months engaged to 36-year-old wealth management financier Ethan. For 4 full years, we shared a Lincoln Park downtown apartment. Every single recurring household cost, utility bill, insurance policy, streaming subscription, vehicle coverage, and daily living expense landed solely on Ethan's bank account. I'd grown accustomed to that dynamic long before we got engaged, and I genuinely believed our arrangement was permanent, unbreakable, guaranteed to continue all the way through our Summer Lake Geneva wedding and into our marriage. I never once thought he'd walk away from supporting me the second I admitted I'd fallen for someone new. That critical miscalculation unraveled every layer of the comfortable, secure life I'd spent years building around his steady 6-figure income, and every single brutal consequence I faced afterward was entirely self-inflicted, yet I spent weeks convinced Ethan's cold, calculated retaliation was unprovoked, cruel, and completely out of line. I'm writing this full breakdown of every single event from my unfiltered perspective to lay bare every mistake I made, every entitled assumption I clung to, every desperate, humiliating tactic I deployed to win back his financial safety net, and the crushing, permanent defeat I endured when he held firm on his non-negotiable boundaries without a single moment of hesitation or softening. This isn't a sad breakup story. This is a hard psychological lesson on entitlement, one-sided codependency, and what happens when you treat a loyal partner like a disposable safety cushion until you find someone shinier to chase. From the very start of our relationship, Ethan's steady, predictable wealth became my primary comfort blanket. I've always possessed a sharp, unfiltered personality. I've never softened my opinions to spare other people's feelings, and I labeled my constant cutting jabs as raw, unfiltered honesty to avoid taking accountability for how my words wounded him day in and day out. Early on, Ethan romanticized my bluntness as confidence and decisive charm. He'd tell all his work friends I was refreshingly authentic, unafraid to voice my unvarnished thoughts without sugarcoating anything. I fed into that narrative relentlessly, regularly making snide comparisons between his stable, low-drama finance career and the flashy, spontaneous partners my designer girlfriends dated, repeatedly reminding him he was incredibly lucky I'd agreed to settle down with him despite his boring, risk-averse professional lifestyle. Every time I delivered one of these backhanded compliments disguised as playful banter, Ethan would nod quietly, absorb the criticism without pushing back, and double down on covering every single shared expense to prove his gratitude for my companionship. That quiet, uncompliant tolerance from his side cemented my deep-seated subconscious belief that he would tolerate absolutely anything I dished out, no matter how ungrateful or harsh I acted toward him. Our living financial split was wildly imbalanced from day one, and I made zero consistent effort to adjust that gap. Ethan paid the full Lincoln Park apartment rent, all gas, electric, water, and internet utility charges, both our cell phone family plan monthly fees, comprehensive dual car insurance plus full roadside assistance coverage, every major streaming platform subscription we used together, my exclusive premium high-end gym membership that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget, and every credit card bill I racked up on an authorized user line he'd opened solely for my daily spending. My freelance graphic design income fluctuated wildly month to month. During busy client seasons, I'd toss a small lump sum toward groceries as a token gesture, but during slow, dry spells, I contributed $0 to any household cost whatsoever, fully relying on Ethan's consistent salary to keep my lifestyle completely unchanged. I never sat down to draft a formal shared budget with him, never discussed long-term financial fairness, never even acknowledged the massive disparity between our respective financial contributions. Deep down, I operated under a silent, unspoken contract I'd manufactured entirely in my own head. Ethan's responsibility was to fund my comfortable lifestyle indefinitely, and my only required contribution to the relationship was my physical presence and occasional affectionate attention whenever I felt like doling it out. I never once considered his own financial stress, the hours of overtime he logged at his downtown wealth management firm to maintain that high monthly disposable income, or the fact he was sinking thousands of dollars into our upcoming wedding venue deposit, catering retainer, and vendor booking fees all by himself with zero financial input from me. The wedding planning process amplified my entitled mindset tenfold. I picked the most expensive lakeside venue in Lake Geneva, demanded high-end custom floral arrangements, luxury bridal wear, and a lengthy guest list filled with all my industry designer friends, fully confident Ethan would absorb every last cost without asking me to pitch in a single cent. I viewed our upcoming marriage as a formal legal seal on the one-sided financial dynamic we'd already operated under for years, and I had zero intention of shifting that uneven power balance once we exchanged vows. Months before I reached out to Ethan with my breakup text, I'd already begun forming a romantic connection with a new man, a freelance creative director I'd met at a downtown design networking mixer. He possessed every trait I'd spent years claiming Ethan lacked: spontaneous energy, a glamorous social circle, bold artistic flair, zero boring corporate finance routine weighing him down. I craved the thrill of his unpredictable personality and the fresh excitement of a brand new romantic entanglement, yet I had absolutely no desire to surrender the stable financial safety net Ethan had spent for years building for me. My subconscious game plan was crystal clear long before I sent that fateful mid-afternoon text. I would inform Ethan I'd found another partner, deliver a dismissive, unapologetic breakup line with no advance warning or emotional lead-up, then wait for him to spiral into heartbroken desperation, beg me to reconsider our engagement, shower me with extra financial gestures to win my affection back, and continue covering all my bills and daily expenses while I split my time between the new creative director and our shared apartment. I genuinely believed Ethan's years of quiet tolerance and unwavering financial support guaranteed he'd swallow every ounce of humiliation to avoid losing me entirely, even after I openly admitted I'd fallen for another man. That dangerous psychological blind spot, rooted in years of one-sided codependency and my consistent ability to get my way with zero pushback, set every catastrophic subsequent event into irreversible motion. I sent the text on a random Wednesday afternoon while Ethan sat locked in his downtown office buried in client wealth portfolio meetings, fully aware he would receive the message mid-workday with no advanced emotional preparation from me whatsoever. The text was short, brutal, and entirely unconcerned with his feelings. I found someone else deal with it. No apology, no lengthy explanation, no acknowledgement of our 4 years together, or the wedding we'd fully planned and prepaid for. I hit send, set my phone face down on my apartment desk, and waited eagerly for his flood of panic, pleading replies I'd grown so accustomed to receiving after every minor argument we'd ever had. I anticipated paragraphs of emotional begging, dozens of incoming phone calls, desperate requests to sit down and talk through our problems, lavish promises of expensive gifts or upgraded lifestyle perks to convince me to stay committed to him. Instead, exactly 60 seconds after my message delivered, I received a single one-word reply from Ethan. Finally. That lone short sentence shattered every confident assumption I'd carried about his unconditional loyalty to me, and a cold spike of panic shot straight through my chest the second I read those 2 syllables on my screen. I'd never once considered the possibility Ethan had quietly accumulated years of buried resentment over my constant criticism, my one-sided financial reliance, and my endless dismissive treatment of him, and that simple one-word response revealed he'd been silently counting down the moment I'd end our toxic and balanced partnership for far longer than I'd ever suspected. I waited hours for a follow-up message or incoming phone call from Ethan, but my inbox remained completely silent. No texts, no missed calls, no social media messages, no emotional outbursts of any kind from his end whatsoever. He'd fully cut off all personal communication with me the second he sent that single word reply, and I had zero idea what he planned to do next. I spent the rest of that afternoon scrolling through our shared streaming accounts, ordering grocery delivery to our shared address, and accessing his Prime shopping profile to place several high-end retail orders, fully operating under the delusion nothing about my funded lifestyle would shift simply because I'd admitted I'd fallen for another man. By early evening, the first major crack in my comfortable routine appeared. My cell phone service cut out entirely mid-call with my new creative director lover. I tried troubleshooting the issue for 30 minutes, rebooting my device repeatedly and checking payment portals, before realizing Ethan held sole ownership over our joint Verizon family phone plan and had officially removed my line from his account earlier that afternoon. Panic bubbled higher in my chest, and I shot Ethan an irritated, accusatory text demanding an immediate explanation for the disconnected phone service, complaining he was acting petty, immature, and wildly overreacting to our breakup news. As I hit send on that angry message, my Instacart grocery delivery notification failed to process entirely, the payment method linked to his credit card having been revoked without advance warning from his side. Still, Ethan refused to send a single reply to any of my frustrated, demanding texts flooding his inbox. That night I sat alone in our shared Lincoln Park apartment, scrolling through every streaming platform we'd used together for years, only to discover Ethan had remotely logged my account off every single device across Netflix, Max, and Hulu simultaneously. My gym membership auto-charge failed to process the following morning. The authorized credit card he'd given me for all daily spending had been locked and removed from his monthly payment rotation, and my full Geico car insurance coverage plus attached roadside assistance plan had been canceled entirely, Ethan removing my name as an authorized driver from his sole-owned policy through his online insurance portal while I slept overnight. Every single comfort and convenience I'd grown fully dependent on vanished one by one over a 24-hour window, stripped away systematically by Ethan with zero dramatic public threats, no emotional outbursts, no petty retaliatory taunts. He treated cutting every financial tie to me like a routine administrative work task at his finance firm, cold, precise, and entirely unemotional. He packed a small travel bag with only his personal clothing, legal documents, and work electronics while I was out running a quick coffee errand that morning, left our apartment key on the kitchen countertop after photographing every single room to document the undamaged property condition for legal records, and moved all his temporary belongings to a friend's West Loop apartment without leaving a single handwritten note behind for me to find. I returned home to an empty master bedroom, every trace of his personal possessions removed entirely, all my funded daily utilities and subscription access revoked across the board, and zero way to contact him to demand he reverse all these sudden life-altering changes to my routine. My initial frustration rapidly spiraled into unbridled rage, and I bombarded his cell phone with dozens of blocked unknown number calls, sent lengthy angry emails labeling him unsafe and unpredictable to live alongside, and fired off social media messages alternating between desperate pleas for him to reconsider cutting my financial support and vicious personal insults attacking his self-esteem and boring career choice. Ethan maintained total radio silence through every single barrage of hostile communication I sent his way, refusing to engage with me on any personal level whatsoever. By the third full day after my breakup text, I'd exhausted every personal avenue of reaching Ethan to demand he restore my full financial support system, and I landed on what I believed was a foolproof leverage tactic, retaining a licensed local family legal attorney to contact Ethan on my behalf and pressure him into resuming all monthly financial assistance I'd grown reliant on for 4 years. I walked into my lawyer's office armed with a one-sided recount of our relationship, deliberately omitting every critical detail about my decision to cheat and unilaterally terminate our 8-month engagement, leaving out all context about my consistent one-sided financial reliance on Ethan's income, and framing the entire situation as an unprovoked sudden financial abandonment by my former fiancé after a minor trivial relationship disagreement. My attorney fully absorbed only my biased version of events before drafting a formal professional voicemail to deliver to Ethan's work line, referencing marital shared assets and sudden removal of necessary spousal financial support as the core legal grievances we intended to pursue against him for compensation. I sat back, fully confident the formal legal pressure would immediately force Ethan to cave to every single one of my financial demands and reinstate all my canceled bills and subscription services within hours of receiving the attorney's outreach. When Ethan returned my lawyer's single phone call, his concise, factual, emotionally neutral response completely erased all the legal leverage I'd falsely believed I held over him. He laid out 4 unarguable hard facts in a calm, level tone without raising his voice once. We had never legally married. The entire Lincoln Park apartment lease was registered solely under his legal name with my signature nowhere on the rental contract. No signed prenuptial or cohabitation agreement existed anywhere granting me legal rights to his income or assets, and every single bank account, credit line, insurance policy, and subscription service he'd canceled was registered exclusively to his social security number and funded 100% out of his personal monthly salary. He asked my attorney to clearly outline what binding legal statute granted me entitlement to ongoing financial support after I'd personally sent a text terminating our engagement and admitting I pursued a separate romantic partner outside our relationship, a direct question my legal representative could not answer with any concrete legal code or binding written contract. Ethan agreed to only communicate with our legal team through formal written email correspondence moving forward, refusing all future phone or in-person meeting requests, and restated clearly he held zero obligation to continue subsidizing my daily lifestyle after I'd voluntarily ended our romantic partnership without prior discussion or compromise. My attorney ended the call visibly deflated, immediately recognizing there existed zero viable legal grounds to pursue any form of transitional financial support or asset split from Ethan on my behalf, and relayed that devastating lack of leverage back to me in our follow-up office meeting an hour later. Desperate to shift the narrative back in my favor, I drafted an extremely long, emotional accusatory email to Ethan directly that same afternoon, completely rewriting the context surrounding my breakup text to soften my own culpability. I claimed I'd only sent the harsh deal with it line in a fleeting burst of unregulated emotional anger, that I'd never intended to permanently end our engagement, and that I'd fully expected us to schedule an in-depth conversation to work through our relationship issues before any permanent separation took place. I labeled Ethan's systematic removal of all my funded living expenses as extreme, vindictive retaliation intended to punish me from momentary emotional outburst, then laid out a detailed, itemized list of all monthly costs I insisted Ethan remained legally and morally obligated to cover until I could rebuild my freelance design client roster and become financially independent. Full apartment rent, all utility charges, cell phone service, weekly grocery delivery fees, and even ongoing private mental health therapy session bills I'd recently signed up for. I coined the phrase transitional assistance to frame my endless financial demands as reasonable temporary support rather than one-sided entitlement, convinced the emotional weight of my lengthy written appeal would trigger Ethan's lingering guilt and push him to reverse all the financial cuts he'd implemented 3 days prior. I pressed send on the lengthy email and waited anxiously by my phone for a remorseful, compromising reply from his side, only to receive a single short, unwavering written response minutes later. Ethan's email contained 3 definitive statements. Our engagement was officially terminated by my own unsolicited text message. No further financial support of any kind would be provided to me moving forward, and all remaining communication related to our former cohabitation needed to be routed exclusively through my retained legal counsel instead of direct personal messages between us. Immediately after sending that brief response, Ethan blocked my personal cell phone number permanently, cutting off all direct text and call access to him entirely. Within 60 minutes of Ethan's blocking my personal number, my attorney reached out to me with a drastically shifted, far more cautious tone, no longer confident we could secure any financial restitution through legal channels. His follow-up email to Ethan contained no formal demand letters or threat of civil litigation, only neutral clarifying questions regarding the apartment lease terms, joint account funding history, wedding deposit refund eligibility, and whether Ethan had ever signed any written document promising lifelong financial support to me post-separation. Ethan answered every single factual query thoroughly and transparently in a written email reply, reiterating once more there existed no shared marital assets, no binding financial support promises, and he would decline all proposed formal mediation sessions between our legal teams since there remained no shared future or joint property to negotiate over. The moment my attorney confirmed Ethan held zero legal liability to fund my lifestyle post-breakup, I abandoned formal legal outreach temporarily and resorted to indirect harassment tactics to force Ethan back into direct personal contact with me. I borrowed a close friend's cell phone to message Ethan across multiple social media platforms, firing off paragraphs of hostile text accusing him of intentionally ruining my livelihood, labeling his boundary setting as cruel abandonment, and repeating the toxic talking point that real loyal men do not walk away from their partners during temporary relationship hardship. I took screenshots of every single hostile message I sent, fully anticipating Ethan would fly into an emotional defensive spiral and cave to my financial demands, yet he ignored every social media message entirely, only saving all my aggressive written communications as documented digital evidence for potential future legal reference if I escalated my harassment further down the line. While Ethan was away at his West Loop friend's apartment that evening, I remained alone inside our shared Lincoln Park rental space, fully confident I could wait him out long enough for him to reverse all canceled services and resume paying all my recurring bills. I received an automated rental property rent reminder email the next morning, the full monthly apartment charge due within 24 hours, and I forwarded the bill straight to Ethan's unmonitored secondary work email address with a short snarky message asking what plan he had in place to cover the upcoming rent deadline. I fully assumed Ethan would immediately submit the full rental payment, as he'd done every single month for 4 years running, yet he never sent a single dollar toward the rent balance or replied to my forwarded reminder email at all. Shortly after the rent deadline notification landed in my inbox, I attempted to file an auto insurance roadside assistance claim after a minor vehicle scratch, only to receive an automated system rejection alert informing me I'd been fully removed from Ethan's sole-owned Geico policy weeks prior, with no active coverage or emergency towing benefits attached to my driver's license anymore. That dual financial blow, unpaid full apartment rent looming overhead plus complete loss of car insurance protection, erased the last shred of false confidence I'd clung to that Ethan would quietly resume funding my daily life without resistance. My anger rapidly devolved into raw, unmasked fear as I fully grasped how completely dependent I'd become on his consistent income to maintain my standard of living over the years, with zero personal emergency savings buffer or independent monthly cash flow to cover basic essential expenses on my own 2 feet. Desperate to regain any form of leverage over Ethan, I instructed my attorney to draft a follow-up outreach email begging Ethan to consider temporary transitional financial aid to prevent me from facing immediate housing and transportation instability, promising once I secured steady, high-paying freelance design client work, I would no longer rely on his monetary support. Ethan's one-sentence written reply to this formal legal request shattered every last hope I held of receiving any financial leniency from him. There exists no legal or moral obligation for my client to continue providing ongoing financial support to a party who unilaterally terminated our engagement and pursued an external romantic relationship of their own free will. After receiving that final uncompromising response from Ethan via our legal representative, my new creative director lover abruptly cut off all contact with me entirely, vanishing without a single explanatory text or phone call. I later learned he discovered I had zero independent financial stability or consistent income stream to sustain the upscale lifestyle he preferred to maintain, and he had no interest in taking over Ethan's previous role as my full-time financial safety net after learning all my recurring bills and housing costs fell entirely on someone else's wallet up until our separation. I texted every mutual friend we shared between Ethan and myself, spreading one-sided biased rumors claiming Ethan had unexpectedly abandoned me without warning for no legitimate reason, painting myself as an innocent victim of sudden cold-hearted abandonment rather than the person who'd voluntarily ended our engagement and cheated first. Every mutual contact relayed these fabricated victimhood narratives back to Ethan, yet he never sent a single rebuttal message to correct their skewed perception of our breakup, choosing complete silence as the most effective defense against my public reputation smear campaign. As my financial instability compounded day after day, unpaid rent piling up, no active car insurance, all streaming and gym membership access permanently revoked, zero usable credit lines for daily shopping, I was forced to take drastic, humiliating action to secure temporary affordable housing. I listed dozens of my personal designer wardrobe pieces and high-end home decor items Ethan had gifted me over the 4 years on Facebook Marketplace for discounted resale prices, selling belongings I'd previously mocked Ethan for purchasing due to his budget-conscious, frugal spending habits. I reached out to a casual female friend from my design industry to beg temporary room and board accommodations in her small compact apartment, agreeing to move into her spare, cramped guest bedroom with minimal personal storage space available to me. The massive lifestyle downgrade from our spacious downtown Lincoln Park luxury rental to a tiny shared guest room served as brutal, tangible proof of exactly how much financial security Ethan had single-handedly provided me throughout our entire relationship, a harsh reality I'd spent years deliberately ignoring to feed my entitled, ungrateful mindset. Simultaneously, Ethan formally submitted full cancellation paperwork for our prepaid Lake Geneva summer wedding venue, accepting the complete loss of all thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits without attempting to pressure me into splitting the sunk financial loss with him. When I learned Ethan had voluntarily absorbed the entire wedding financial hit alone without demanding any monetary compensation from me, I briefly experienced a fleeting twinge of guilt over my own endless one-sided financial reliance, yet that momentary remorse vanished within minutes as I refocused all my energy on plotting new tactics to force Ethan back into providing financial support for my living expenses. My next calculated manipulation tactic targeted Ethan's parents, two kind, compassionate older adults I knew maintained a close emotional bond with their son and possessed a natural instinct to mediate conflict and extend sympathetic grace to people experiencing hardship. I composed a lengthy, heartfelt, emotional email addressed directly to Ethan's mother, deliberately omitting all critical context about my decision to cheat and unilaterally terminate our engagement, framing myself as a confused, heartbroken partner blindsided by Ethan's sudden cold withdrawal and unprovoked financial cutoffs. I wrote detailed paragraphs recounting all the happy, positive memories we'd shared across our 4-year relationship, begging Ethan's parents to step in and convince their son to soften his rigid boundaries and restore my necessary monthly financial transitional aid to avoid me facing homelessness and complete financial ruin. I hoped his family's maternal and paternal sympathy would pressure Ethan into compromising his firm financial stance out of respect for his parents' feelings, a manipulation scheme that immediately backfired the second Ethan's mother forwarded my entire emotional pleading email straight to his personal inbox with a single neutral question asking if he was safe and emotionally handling the breakup well. Ethan replied to his mother with a concise, fact-based breakdown of every event leading to our separation, sharing full, unredacted screenshots of my original breakup text admitting I'd found another partner alongside documentation of all my months of hostile, harassing messages sent post-separation. After reading Ethan's unbiased factual recount of our toxic and balanced dynamic, his mother sent me a short, polite reply stating she fully supported her son's decision to set firm protective boundaries to preserve his own mental peace and self-respect, declining to mediate any further conflict between us or pressure Ethan into providing me any form of monetary assistance moving forward. That total rejection from Ethan's immediate family eliminated yet another major leverage point I'd banked on to force him into compromising his unwavering financial cutoff policy. Undeterred by my failed family manipulation attempt, I instructed my retained attorney to draft a formal legal demand letter alleging severe emotional dependency damage stemming from our 4-year cohabitation, claiming implicit verbal promises of lifelong financial security Ethan had supposedly guaranteed me during our engagement planning phase. The letter contained 0 attached written contracts, recorded verbal agreements, or witness statements to back up my vague emotional dependency claims, relying entirely on subjective emotional distress rhetoric with no tangible legal evidence to validate my requested financial compensation demands. Ethan declined to submit any written reply to this empty legal thread entirely, forcing my attorney to admit there existed 0 viable civil case grounds to pursue monetary damages or ongoing spousal-style support from Ethan in any state family court jurisdiction. A few days following our attorney's abandoned legal threat outreach, I received a final neutral short email from Ethan's legal representative informing me they would permanently drop all attempted financial restitution claims against Ethan and only coordinate limited future written communication solely for the purpose of scheduling a single time slot for me to retrieve any leftover personal belongings I'd left behind inside the former Lincoln Park apartment. There would be no further legal negotiations, mediation sessions, or financial settlement offers extended my way under any circumstance, the email confirmed. All of my elaborate multi-layered schemes, legal pressure tactics, reputation smearing through mutual friends, emotional manipulation of Ethan's family, hostile harassment messaging, and indirect social media outreach had completely collapsed one after another with zero tangible financial concessions secured from Ethan whatsoever. Every single leverage tool I'd attempted to wield against him proved entirely useless against his rock-solid, consistent boundaries and unshakable commitment to removing all financial ties to a partner who'd voluntarily discarded him for another romantic interest without a single moment of remorse or advanced consideration for his feelings. Several weeks after Ethan cut off all direct and legal communication with me entirely, I spotted his unfamiliar new smaller downtown apartment building address while driving through a quiet residential side street near his wealth management firm's corporate office. I borrowed a friend's and used sedan vehicle to avoid Ethan immediately recognizing my personal car parked at the far end of his street and waited for his workday to conclude so I could intercept him walking from the subway station back to his new rental building. I planned to stage a casual coincidental run-in, drop all prior hostile accusatory rhetoric temporarily, and deliver a sincere-sounding apology for my past harsh behavior and impulsive breakup texts, begging Ethan to grant me just 5 minutes of private one-on-one conversation to rehash our relationship and potentially rebuild a new mutually beneficial connection that restored his monthly financial support of my living expenses. When Ethan spotted me lingering on his residential sidewalk waiting for him after work, his facial expression remained completely calm and unshaken, no flicker of surprise, anger, or lingering longing crossing his features whatsoever. I immediately launched into my pre-planned apologetic appeal, claiming my new creative director lover had turned out to be a massive, regrettable mistake, that I'd finally realized how much stable security and genuine care Ethan had provided me throughout our 4 years together, and that I deserved a simple 5-minute conversation to explain my regret and attempt to slowly repair our fractured romantic bond with zero rushed pressure attached to the reconciliation process. I emphasized our 8-month engagement status as a binding emotional contract Ethan owed me basic closure for, insisting his flat-out refusal to speak with me for even a few short minutes was cruel, heartless, and completely unforgivable behavior for someone who'd once claimed to love me deeply. Ethan's calm, measured response to my desperate in-person reconciliation plea dismantled every manipulative, emotional narrative I'd spent weeks crafting to win his sympathy back. He stated plainly the definitive end to our relationship had been finalized the exact moment I sent the text admitting I'd found another partner with a dismissive deal with it closing line, and no amount of post-fact regret or regretful backtracking could erase that irreversible breaking point between us. He clarified trust could never simply reset and repair itself just because my external romantic situation had unexpectedly fallen apart, and he had zero interest in reinterpreting or rewriting the clear reality of our toxic and balanced partnership to suit my current desperate financial circumstances. When I began raising my voice and accusing him of punishing me with permanent abandonment instead of offering second chances for human mistakes, Ethan delivered a concise psychological truth I'd spent months refusing to acknowledge. Every negative consequence you're facing right now is not arbitrary punishment from me. They are natural direct consequences stemming from the choices you voluntarily made on your own without any outside coercion or pressure from my side. I continued arguing with him on the sidewalk, labeling him cold and emotionally disconnected for refusing to entertain any possibility of reconciliation, yet Ethan refused to engage in a lengthy back-and-forth shouting match with me on a public residential street. He simply stepped calmly around my stationary body, unlocked his new apartment building's front entry door, and walked inside without glancing back over his shoulder a single time, leaving me standing alone on the empty sidewalk reeling from complete rejection of my reconciliation appeal. That evening I sent Ethan one final anonymous text message from a brand new unregistered disposable cell phone number I'd purchased solely to reach him, containing a single vulnerable line revealing my core deluded assumption that had fueled every bad decision I'd made from the very start of our separation. I never actually believed you would walk away and cut every single one of my financial lifelines completely for good. Ethan never replied to that last anonymous text message, cementing his permanent total disengagement from every form of personal contact with me for the foreseeable future. In the weeks following our sidewalk confrontation, I circulated a heavily revised one-sided victim narrative to every shared mutual friend, industry design colleague, and distant family member I remained in contact with, deliberately omitting my own infidelity and impulsive breakup text entirely. I framed Ethan as an unpredictable, controlling man who'd suddenly abandoned me financially out of nowhere after a minor, trivial lover's quarrel, painting myself as an innocent wounded party caught off guard by his unprovoked, cruel retaliation without any logical root cause behind his boundary-setting choices. I posted vague, cryptic social media captions referencing abandonment, broken trust, and rebuilding after heartbreak without naming Ethan directly, carefully wording each post to encourage our mutual social circle to fill in the blanks and side with my manufactured victimhood perspective without hearing Ethan's unbiased factual side of the entire story. Despite my widespread reputation smear campaign targeting Ethan's character, he never published a single counterpost, never reached out to mutual contacts to correct their skewed understanding of our separation, and never sent me any retaliatory, hostile messages to defend his own public image against my fabricated, one-sided storytelling. His consistent silence robbed my reputation manipulation scheme of all intended impact, as without any emotional defensive reaction from Ethan to feed off of, my victimhood narrative gradually lost traction among our shared social connections over time, with many mutual acquaintances quietly recognizing the obvious gaps and omitted critical context within my biased recount of events. I watched all my carefully constructed tactics to regain financial security and emotional support from Ethan crumble one by one with zero successful payoffs to show for weeks of exhausting manipulative effort, forced to fully confront the harsh psychological reality I'd spent years avoiding. I'd operated under a toxic codependent mindset my entire relationship with Ethan, taking his consistent loyalty and unlimited financial generosity for granted while assuming I could treat him harshly, pursue other romantic partners freely, and still retain all the comparable lifestyle perks he single-handedly funded indefinitely with zero personal accountability or reciprocal effort on my own part. Months after our official separation and failed reconciliation attempt, I continue living cramped in my friend's spare guest bedroom, relying entirely on inconsistent freelance graphic design client paychecks to cover minimal basic food and transit costs with no access to the premium gym membership, multiple streaming platforms, reliable auto insurance coverage, or a spacious luxury downtown apartment I'd grown accustomed to while partnered with Ethan. I've fully sold off all the high-end designer clothing and luxury home gifts Ethan purchased for me over our 4 years together to cover urgent monthly essential living expenses, forced to drastically downgrade every area of my daily lifestyle to match my actual independent income level with no wealthy partner's salary to fall back on for supplementary financial support anymore. My former creative director lover has permanently cut off all communication with me with zero intention of rekindling our brief, short-lived romantic entanglement, having no desire to absorb my consistent monthly living costs the way Ethan voluntarily did for years before I discarded him for another man. Ethan has fully relocated to a quiet, compact apartment walking distance from his downtown finance workplace, eliminated all unnecessary excess monthly expenses he previously covered for me, reconnected with old friends he drifted apart during our imbalanced 4-year cohabitation, and reports consistent mental peace and stress reduction after fully severing all financial and emotional ties to our toxic one-sided partnership. He canceled all lingering wedding vendor contracts and absorbed every dollar of lost venue deposits without attempting to recoup any split monetary loss from me, viewing the sunk wedding costs as a worthwhile one-time tuition payment to learn a vital lifelong psychological lesson about recognizing entitled codependent patterns early on in romantic partnerships before committing long-term to a toxic imbalance dynamic. After months of reflecting on every terrible choice I made leading up to and following my impulsive breakup text to Ethan, I can finally recognize the core flawed internal belief system that fueled every single one of my self-destructive actions over the course of our separation. I falsely believed I was entitled to unlimited, unconditional financial safety and emotional support from Ethan regardless of how I treated him, how harshly I criticized his career and personality, or whether I chose to pursue external romantic connections outside our committed engagement. I operated under the delusion loyalty and financial generosity from a partner existed as permanent guaranteed resources I could exploit at will without any reciprocal respect, gratitude, or accountability required on my end of the relationship dynamic. When Ethan finally drew clear, firm boundaries and removed all financial lifelines he'd voluntarily provided for years, I refused to accept natural logical consequences for my own voluntary decisions and instead resorted to legal threats, family manipulation, public reputation smearing, harassment messaging, and desperate in-person reconciliation pleas in a futile attempt to force him back into the one-sided supportive role I'd grown fully reliant on to sustain my upscale lifestyle. Every single manipulative tactic I deployed against Ethan failed completely because his decision to set hard protective boundaries was rooted in steady long-term emotional self-respect rather than fleeting reactive anger or temporary hurt feelings I could easily manipulate with short-term emotional appeals and manufactured victimhood narratives. I learned the brutal psychological lesson far too late. Love and financial support from another human being can never be treated as an infinite disposable resource you're allowed to take for granted while prioritizing your own fleeting impulses and romantic whims without considering the lasting harm inflicted on the loyal partner who consistently shows up for you through every hardship life throws their way. Respect is the non-negotiable foundation of any sustainable long-term romantic partnership. Without mutual reciprocal gratitude and accountability on both sides, even years of consistent generosity and unwavering loyalty from one person will eventually evaporate the moment they finally choose to prioritize their own mental peace and self-worth over endlessly subsidizing a one-sided toxic dynamic built entirely on the other partner's unregulated entitlement and lack of basic appreciation.